Today we're going to dive into a nonfiction notice and note strategy called Contrasts and Contradictions. When you are reading a notice, the author shows you a difference between what you know and what is happening in the text, or a difference between two or more things in the text, you should stop and ask yourself, what is the difference and why does it matter? The answer will help you see the details that show you the main idea, compare and contrast, understand author's purpose, infer, make a generalization, or notice a cause and effect. On the left side of the slide, you will find arrows. Move the arrows to align with the meaning of why the use of contradiction matters. I'll do the first one to give you an example. Facts is another meaning for details. If the nonfiction text includes a detail, it is likely a fact. Pause the video to align the rest of the arrows. Here are the accurate locations of the arrows. As you see them, make corrections if needed. You may need to pause the video after I show the answers. So we already know that see the details are facts. Main idea, that is what the text is mostly about. Comparing and contrasting, you're likely looking at the differences and similarities. To understand author's purpose is to understand the author's reasons. To infer would be combining clues from the text and your prior knowledge. To make a generalization is a common idea or statement. And noticing cause and effect would be involving impacts or results. Authors tend to give you signal words to show a contrast or contradiction. This often reveals a difference, change, or shift in the text. On this slide, there are a few examples of those signal words or phrases. See if you can identify which words signal a contrast and which ones do not. Pause the video to complete this sort. Let's review the answers. Be sure to make corrections if needed. In the contrast or contradiction side, you should have the following words: by contrast, unlike, different from, contradicts, and instead. In the other category, words that are not contrast or contradiction words, those are none, every, and seldom. Pause the video and make corrections. Now that we have a grasp on what the signal words might be, let's take a look at a new list of signal words. Just like the previous slide, complete the sort by determining which words could be considered signal words for contrasts and contradictions and which ones are not. Pause the video to complete this slide. Check out the answers on this sort. Be sure to make corrections as I read through each signal word. For the contrast or contradiction side, you should have the following words: by contrast, then again, although, otherwise, nonetheless, alternatively, still, and yet. On the other side of the T-chart, you should have nobody and everybody. Pause the video to make corrections. Since we are stronger at identifying signal words, let's practice identifying situations that would be considered a contrast or contradiction. In this video, pay attention to what you think will happen versus what actually happens. Pause this video to play the video on your slide now. After watching this totally disgusting video of a horned lizard versus a bobcat, if asked, you probably would have predicted the bobcat having an obvious win here. However, the horned lizard has an unexpected attack that the bobcat, and likely you as well, didn't see coming. This is a contradiction because it is not something we would have anticipated happening. We know that bobcats are typically good at hunting. Its size and ability proved to be worthless when it was squirted in the face. Based on what we know now, we can make an inference about the lizard's successful escape plan. We can determine the author's purpose that shows us that size doesn't always matter in the animal kingdom. We can make a generalization that all horned lizards squirt blood out of their eyes to avoid being another animal's dinner. And we can see a cause and effect relationship, which shows us that as a result of the horned lizard spraying the bobcat in the face with blood, the lizard was able to escape. Now that we can identify what a contradiction looks like, let's read through this text and see if we can identify any contrast or contradiction. This text is an excerpt taken from an article called Guarana's Story, published by the National Geographic Explorer. Pause the video and read this text on your own. From the first sentence, we can recognize that this text takes place in a different country. We can conclude that there will likely be some contrast or differences. You should have noticed that everyone wakes up to a loudspeaker to pray. People in the United States aren't told when to wake up or even to pray, and loudspeakers are for sporting events or large gatherings that we know of. This is a big contrast to how we live. You should also notice that Guarana is a 10-year-old and leaves to pray in the dark on her own. It's likely that you've been told to be home or with an adult when it's dark outside. That doesn't seem to be the case for Guarana. It seems this must be more common where she lives, since it happens automatically once the loudspeaker wakes everyone up. Finally, you might have noticed that she put on a black robe and covers her head with a shawl. I think the author mentioned the way she dressed for a reason, because it is a big contrast to the way most people dress in the United States. Based on all of these contrasts, I can tell that Guarana lives a very different life than what seems to be common in the United States. Now it is your turn to test your skills. Look at the short text. After you have read it, move the green arrow to point at the contrast or contradiction signal word or phrase. Next, answer the question at the bottom of the slide. Pause the video to complete this slide now. The arrow should be pointing to the phrase "on the other hand," which signals to the reader that they are about to discuss or reveal a contrast or contradiction. This particular phrase signals a difference between Sparta and Athens, which helps you determine the answer for part 2 of the slide. When asked, what is the difference between Sparta and Athens? Why does it matter? The best answer is B. Sparta was happy staying to themselves on the land they currently occupied. Athens, however, wanted more control and more power over more land. This is important because this is the reason why Athens decided to invade Sparta. Pause the video if you need to make changes. Now let's do it again. Be sure to move the blue arrow so that it is pointing at the contrast or contradiction word or phrase. Then answer the question at the bottom of this slide. Pause the video to complete this slide. The blue arrow should be pointed at the phrase "even though." This signals a contradiction, which is when inconsistent elements happen. In this case, based on what we know, water turns into ice at 32 degrees. However, the contradiction is that this time the water did not freeze at that temperature. This goes against what we would expect. Pause the video to make corrections. To review, when you are reading and notice the author shows you a difference between what you know and what is happening in the text, or a difference between two or more things in the text, the answer will help you see the details or facts that show you the main idea or what it's mostly about, compare and contrast or reveal differences and similarities, understand the author's purpose or author's reasons, infer or combine your prior knowledge with clues from the text, make a generalization or a common idea, or notice cause and effect, which could be impacts and results.